welcome back to another episode of All Out Poker's final table tournament. We have one hell of an episode for you guys tonight, but first, let's take a look at the chip stacks here tonight. We have the biggest stack at the table, Jeremy, a very familiar face. We've seen him a ton on this final table. Second in chips, to his direct left, we have Daniel, a newcomer at the final table at 220K. Then we have our KK Poker Maritime Ambassador, Trevor, sitting at 203K. But we didn't forget about our smallest stack, Steven, who is our last week's winner and last week's biggest stack. The tables have turned. He is sitting with 7 big blinds. Let's see if he can make a comeback in this tournament. But in the meantime, let's get into some action. Oh, it feels good to be back here doing some great commentating for you guys tonight. My name is Dave Frazier, and I am the host and commentator for All Out Poker. Looks like we are starting off this first hand with a bet from Jeremy, the big stack, firing out 20K. Blinds are 2,000, 4,000. He's got to be careful, though. He's got 2 big stacks direct on his left. Looks like it's getting folded around to the big blind. Matt, who calls with Queen Jack suited. Looks like we're going to go and see a flop. Oh, Jeremy ends up hitting 3 aces. Matt hits the queen. Jeremy fires out 8,000. Matt shoves all in. Jeremy instant calls. The very first hand of the final table tournament. Matt is in terrible shape here. He's going to need running queens, and there's a queen. He does not end up getting the last queen on the river. Jeremy ends up taking down that first hand, and to make matters worse, the blinds have just gone up to 3,000, 6,000 with a 6,000 big blind ante. Matt looks a little confused. Thought he took down that pot. Matt ends up getting eliminated in 10th place. It's like action is to Bernie now with ace-5 suited. He folds that under the gun.
No queen on the turn, we're all right. Queen on the turn.
Action gets folded to Trevor. Trevor folds. Sebastian with ace-4 offsuit on the cutoff. Makes it 12K. Looks like blinds are still 2,000 and 4,000 for this hand. Looks like they'll be going up next hand. My apologies. Interesting flop for Paul. Paul ends up hitting a gut shot here. Does have the 9 as an overcard as well to the board. Sebastian has a gut shot. But he does have the best hand here with ace high. That 10 now gives Paul an open-ended. See that he has 11 outs. Looks like he's gonna take the aggression here and make it 12K. Sebastian ends up folding. Moving into the next hand here.
All in for 39,000.
Ben shoves all in with ace-5 suited, 39K. One of the short stacks at the table.
Still nothing? No. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll just move these 3 just to get things.
It's like Steven folds. It looks like we are having a little bit of a card reader error. Paul has king-queen suited. Ben's got the better diamond, though. Makes the call. Got ourselves an all-in situation here. Ben's tournament life is at risk. No help to Paul. Ben's still ahead. Ooh, there's an open-ended now for Paul. But he does not get there. That 10 gave Paul quite a bit of outs on the turn.
We'll try
But
one
Ben
more.
ends up taking down that pot and gets a well-needed double up.
Yeah, see it right there now, so. I hope not.
There'll be 2 cards.
Shouldn't be, because I just registered it. I'm all in for 30.
Now Steven ends up waking up with ace king. The short stack at the table ends up shoving all in for 30K.
I'm all in.
And Paul shoves all in here with pocket tens on the button. It's like it's getting folded around here. We got ourselves another all-in situation. A ton of all-ins. What is this, the third hand that we played? Got ourselves a race. Steven's going to need an ace or a king. That flop does not help him at all. He is still looking for an ace or a king, and he does not get it. Steven ends up getting eliminated in 9th place. It looks like we are no longer going to have a repeat winner. That hand ended up putting Paul right at the middle of the pack with 18 big blinds and 110K in chips. Action is getting folded around to Sebastian, who ends up shoving all in with ace queen offsuit. How many all-ins have we had so far? The small stacks are really pushing back and trying to take down this tournament. But it looks like everybody folds, and Sebastian ends up taking down the blinds and antes, which is always good.
It's on. Just put that out there. You know. Put that out there.
Just saying.
Paul asking if they wanted to do a 8-way split.
It was perfect time.
Oh, it was good.
Everything worked out perfect for him.
Action is to Jeff here on the button, who lets it go.
If we had less
Now it's
chips,
between the small blind and the big blind. Jeremy ends up waking up with kings in the big blind. It's going to put that pressure onto Ben. I imagine is going to let the queen 4 go, which he does. Jeremy, I don't know if he showed the kings there or not,
Yeah.
You were.
but we know what he had.
I was thinking.
Actually, Trevor first.
Well, I was just thinking he's gonna try to bluff because the other hand.
Action is to Trevor with king 7 offsuit, and he folds.
Before you bet.
It's like we had somebody fold out of turn. Action is getting folded around to Ben with pocket tens.
I'm all in.
Shoves all in yet again. 72K in chips. Jeremy's got a pretty interesting hand here with ace 9 offsuit.
7.
He does have one of the bigger stacks right behind him in the big blind. Looks like he's going to wait for another time, and Daniel quickly lets that go. Ben ends up taking down those blinds.
Action step first.
Looks like Sebastian is thinking about a fold. Thought he was going to shove his remaining stack in there. Looks like Daniel's going to limp in here in the small blind with queen 2 offsuit. Trevor with 10-5. We're going to see a flop with the small blind versus big blind. Looks like Trevor hits a pair of 5s. Dan checks it over to him. Trevor fires out a little bit and gets Dan to fold.
Action's to halt.
Actions to Bernie.
Makes it 12.
Makes it 12K here with a nice little suited connector of 9-8 suited. Jeremy's got his own suited hand here with King Jack suited of diamonds. Trevor in the small blind with king queen. He's going to make the call. Sebastian, let's go the jack six. Looks like Bernie hits his pair of eights. Neither Jeremy or Trevor has hit anything.
To Trevor first.
Bernie acting out of turn, firing out 16K. Option is still to Trevor though. He can decide what kind of bet he wants to make. Looks like he just folds.
That is 16.
So Jeremy calls. Gonna float on this flop.
Actions to Bernie.
Third club comes down. Bernie's wondering if he's beat. Jeremy looks like he's grabbing some chips. He's gonna try to take advantage of that weakness. Fires out 43K.
They'll put down on YouTube.
Bernie ends up folding the best hand. Requesting that I edit that hand out. Sorry, Bernie, that's not going to happen.
Montreal.
Yeah, Gary had kings and I got him to fold them with a 7-high flop.
All in for
It's like Jeff shoves all in here with queen jack offsuit. Another small stack. Really trying to get down to that six-handed. Once we hit six-handed, the big blind ante is cut in half. I think everybody is going to fold. Even Sebastian folds the king-queen. Paul folds as well. It's like Jeff takes down those blinds and antes.
Poker, about 6 weeks ago. He got about 7.
Jeff, ace-jack suited. He's going to attempt it again.
He got second place.
Has a much better hand than he did last time.
54, I think.
Dan ends up making the call here with pocket nines.
He won a
Sebastian folds one of Dan's nines. It's like we got ourselves a nice little race again.
Come on, Ritzy. You had it?
The pocket nines going to hold up here. That's a great flop for pocket nines. Seven doesn't help him. He's looking for an ace or jack, and he doesn't get it. Jeff ends up getting eliminated in 8th place. We need one more player to get eliminated to cut those blinds and antes. There are 7 players left on the final table.
I was just kind of looking around the site there the other day. So I kind of wanted to play. So it was,
Easy to join back up.
oh yeah, it was not something I was worried about. It was,
Actions to Paul here. Gets folded to him on the button.
it's like
Got ace-10
I don't
offsuit.
travel much. I mean, I got 2 kids, so it's like hard for me to kind of get it. So
It's like he's going to fire out
22 is the bet.
22K.
How old are your kids?
9 and 5.
Like
Yep, they're,
Paul's going to take down those blinds and
their
antes.
own little attitudes.
Have a feeling we're going to see quite a bit of that tonight. Paul has ace-5 suited here, but he lets it go in the cutoff.
I'll take a walk. I haven't looked yet.
Jeremy's requesting a walk from the small stack, or one of the small stacks.
I'll take a walk in.
Like Ben is debating. Looks like he just flat calls. He's got Jeremy crushed here though. Has a better 10 with that 9. Probably won't matter though. Jeremy's got quite a few outs. Looks like split outs though. Chopping outs. 24 outs to chop this pot.
You've been okay with it. Read ahead.
Ben ends up hitting a straight on the river. Looks like he's debating what to bet.
How many do we have to
That's
put
20.
Yankees?
Fires out 20K.
For Yankees.
6.
6, yeah. One more player eliminated, we get cut in half.
Can't see how Jeremy can make this call. Only got 10 high. Gonna have to think that Ben is on a complete bluff. With no queen, no jack.
This would be a hero call. 20?
Jeremy looks very interested though. Not sure what he is doing here. Certainly he's not gonna make the call.
This is even better. I don't know, I think you have like 5, 6 or something. Just a little hand that you can whip into. Just for fun. Yeah.
Jeremy calls. Unbelievable, he makes the call. Ben shows him the straight. Certainly a big hero call from Jeremy.
Just for fun. Well, I mean, you're on the right track.
I think that's because it'd be fun more than anything.
Oh, action's determined.
Oh, shit.
Sebastian folding out of turn yet again. So wake up, Sebastian. We're here to play some poker.
Yeah, it is kind of, does kind of.
No, no, for some reason I thought that was just one.
Yeah. Not a big deal.
Sure.
It's like Dan gets a walk.
Sure, so I couldn't take it
Oh
off.
shit.
One of the lights, it was just right on me. Oh,
Yeah.
days I was.
Just for the occasion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, lesson learned.
Yeah.
Paul wakes up with ace 10.
Then I never find out when I went up to 13, then in the WPP in the fall.
Oh, yeah.
I was in the race for player of the year for 2015.
No way.
Looks like he's gonna
29 is the bet?
fire out a bet.
From New York.
Looks like blinds have gone up 4,000, 8,000. With an 8K big blind ante.
I always love hearing people's experiences and stuff like that.
Firing out a 29K bet. Bernie ends up having pocket tens.
I'm sponsored to those.
100K
Maybe
chips.
that's that 1,000.
No.
Looks like he is thinking about his decision here.
I got second in the Colossus in 19, I believe, and one
He has just over 10 big blinds, and he shoves his remaining stack in
100,000.
100,000.
100,000.
No, it's not.
I folded like.
Looks like it's getting folded around.
How much was for
71K for Paul to make the call here with ace 10.
So me and
Great situation for Bernie.
3.5 hours. 3 hours and 15 minutes was late. It's up in the middle of the night coming on morning.
That's a heads up.
It ended at 5 in the morning.
Sounds
What do you think about
3
chocolate?
a.m.?
It's big. It's
Well,
up.
we already made a deal earlier on, and
Okay.
I was chip leader when we made the deal.
Looks like Paul is going to make the call. Got ourselves an all-in situation.
We're just gonna play it out for the ring, and we have a WSOP ring.
Pocket tens versus ace 10. Paul is looking for an ace.
Second place in WSOP ring.
There's a queen. It's no help to him.
I don't have a WSOP.
Backdoor straight draws, maybe. There is the king. Does not end up getting the jack that he needs or the ace that he needs. Bernie gets a nice double up,
When I won the main event,
winning a 220K pot.
I won it for 3,000.
That ends up putting Paul sitting at one big blind, 15K in chips, in absolute terrible shape. And that big blind is just coming around. He's got ace 9, no better time to put it in. Here we go.
I think I busted it.
Well, it was in the first 20 minutes. I don't know if it was the first one out or not.
Oh, yeah?
Is that
Like it's getting folded around.
King high flush. with the straight flush draw, but he turned the ace high.
A lot of people folding the 7-2s and 8-2s.
So we both turned the.
Trevor folds 8-2. Sebastian with pocket threes.
Oh, go see.
Makes the call. We got ourselves a nice little flip.
For a royal and 9 for a straight flush. He had ace and 9.
I'd like to be able to find it, you know, a while ago you were kind of iffing that I folded king 10. I'd like to be able to find the hand that I folded.
Ooh, there's the ace.
Kind of find
Sebastian is only running to 1-3 left in the deck.
and I folded my.
Does not get it. Paul gets a double up. He's still alive in this tournament.
I believe that he's in there on the highway.
Yes, yeah, that was the ace.
Yeah, so I won the last tournament that they had there.
Bernie with ace king.
Cows, I think it was me and Dave McKinley heads up.
He's still playing?
He was big online at that time. He was second in the world on full tilt poker.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Right.
Like Bernie's going to fire out a bet.
I knew he was doing well. Is he still playing?
38K.
I've seen him after.
Very sizable bet.
A little bit, but not a whole lot.
I haven't seen him.
Action's going to get folded around.
Red Bank when he came
Is Paul going to make the call? He has pocket nines. Can he win another flip?
36 plus your.
I had pocket aces, he had pocket queens, hit the queens. Put me on the tournament, the very next tournament, I had ace king suited, he has ace queen, he hits the queen. And he put me out again.
Same.
And very.
All right, we're going to the races. Paul is going to need to win another flip to stay alive. Can he do it? He was down to one big blind. Oh! There's quad nines for Paul. The absolute nuts. Bernie has no chance of winning that hand. Flopping quads. Paul is staying alive. Ends up putting Paul right back in this tournament. 12 big blinds. He was down to one big blind. Unbelievable. Sebastian is in terrible shape, though. I think he was sitting at 2 big blinds. Dan ends up getting ace jack here. Fires out 20K. It's like Trevor folds.
I would read that chapter.
I don't know when you watch this.
And looks like Dan's just going to take down those blinds. Dan sitting here with ace 9 and
Let's go.
just flat calls. Calls the 8K. Bernie makes the call in the small blind. Ben checks the big blind. 3 ways going to this flop. Like Bernie ends up hitting a pair of 10s. Dan hits a gut shot.
That is 25.
Bernie firing out 25K. Both players fold. Bernie takes down that 57K pot. Dan gets pocket nines now.
That's 30.
Fires out 30K.
No?
Actions, Sebastian.
You had to do
Sebastian ended up folding the ace there. Jeremy ends up getting pocket 8s. He's going to make the call. Both Dan and Jeremy have a little bit of history with each other. I'm expecting to see some action here. Not much action. Both check on the flop. Neither of these players is going to try to take a stab at it. 10 comes down. Queen gives any player a straight. Backdoor spades draws, just gets checked all the way down to the river.
Nines and eights.
End up seeing that Dan's nines takes down that pot. Any bet from either of those players probably would have taken that down. Paul, with his newfound chips, gets ace-jack offsuit. Blinds are 5,000 at 10,000 with a 10,000 big blind ante.
That's 40.
Fires out almost half his stack. A 40K bet. Just going to take down the blinds.
We got an all-in for 18,000.
Sebastian finally decides to put it all in.
Sorry.
Queen 4 offsuit.
Nice little dig.
It is a race.
Can he do exactly what Paul did and stay alive in this tournament? Imagine the players are itching for him to get out to be able to get that big blind ante cut in half. Ben with ace-9 shoves all in. A little bit of protection for Sebastian.
Oh, I never looked.
Sebastian is going blind.
Pretty much everything. Oh, it's a race.
I got 2 cards.
He's not crushed.
That's fine, yeah.
38% to win.
I had a 9.
There's a pair of 9s now. Sebastian needs a queen or a jack. Or a 7 splits the pot. There's the jack, the queen. Sebastian ends up getting a straight on the river. He ends up getting a double up. The players must be some upset trying to eliminate these small stacks, but they're just a thorn in their side. Sebastian sitting with 6 big blinds, and now Ben is also sitting at the same with 6 big blinds.
Usually it's around 70. It's been, I think last time it was like 80.
Paul gets ace-king
That was just under 70.
under the gun. 121K in his stack.
I'm all in.
Shoves all in.
121,000 all in.
Looks like it's going to get folded around. Sebastian's got pocket 6s, and he lets it go. That was a great situation for Sebastian to get his chips in on another coin flip, but he decides to wait. I am shocked that he folded those 6s there. And now Bernie gets ace-king this next hand. Under the gun.
That's 35.
Fires out a whopping 35K bet. Action's getting folded around to the small blind and big blind.
No, I didn't.
Paul, let's go the ace 4.
Maybe fold big. You know that's what you're waiting for.
It's not that bad of a guy.
No, I don't.
You gotta
I
put
kinda-
up. You gotta put up.
Yeah.
Dan limps in here with Jack 10 offsuit.
It's not like you're hurting for players.
Trevor hasn't been getting involved in too many pots here. He's got ace 3 suited.
We'll just be on the wait list for a long time.
Decides to let it go.
God, I didn't see it 2 years later.
Action is to Bernie now. Bernie checks. Both players end up hitting top pair here. Dan has the better kicker with a jack. Bernie just needs a 4.
35.
Looks like he's gonna start off this flop here with a little bit of aggression. Makes it 25K. Gives Dan the option to see a card. He doesn't take it. There's Bernie's 4. Wow, only 2 4s that were left in the deck. It's like he fires up 40K, gives Dan the same offer to see a card. That's hard to pass up.
I want that one. Oh, I had a 10 too.
Just about as
Bernie
strong.
ends up winning that pot. We'll see that Paul has played the most pots here tonight, 36 VPIP. Bernie second place with 24%. Trevor is the lowest with 8%. We have not seen him get involved in too many hands. Is Trevor going to get involved here with the ace-5? He does not. Moving into this next pot. Ace-queen for Bernie. It's in the small blind.
Ace hit 45.
Firing out a whopping 45K bet.
There.
That's 20.
Dan fires out 20K here with pocket 4s.
Did you think that was a call? Did you think that was a raise?
Action's down to Bernie. He's got queen 10 off suit on the button. Decides to let it go. And Ben wakes up with pocket kings in the small blind. 44K in his stack behind. It's not including his small blind. He shoves it all in.
For 49,000.
I imagine Dan is not getting away from this hand. Probably going to end up seeing an all-in situation yet again, which we do. Dan makes the call.
Kings.
Oh, you're good. By a lot.
It's a great spot for Ben. Dan is going to need a 4 here. Oh, and there's a 4 right in the window. Neither player has a spade either, but he now has chopping outs, but he does not get it on the river. Ben ends up getting eliminated here in 7th place. We are now 6-handed. That means the big blind ante is now cut in half. We'll see Sebastian is still holding on. I'm shocked that he is still in this tournament. Trevor finally waking up with a hand here with pocket 10s under the gun.
Yeah, sorry. The ante is always on the spot. It's just the seat, that's all.
Well, that's a towel, by the way, what I'm about to do.
Trevor's sitting with about 15 big blinds in his stack.
Is 26.
Fires out 26K. It's the first time we've seen him raise here pre-flop. Pretty sure. It's like Jeremy is going to call. King 4 suited. Oh, and there is trip 10s for Trevor. Jeremy ends up hitting mid-pair here with a king.
Yes, they are. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That ace down on the board is not a great card for Jeremy. He's not going to feel confident about his hand with that on the board. Little does he know that Trevor is sitting behind with a
I'm sure
monster.
you're right because I didn't grab 10K. So.
Checks it over to Trevor. Trevor
21.
fires out 21. Jeremy makes the call. There's the jack, putting out a possible 4-card straight now. That card is going to worry Trevor. It goes check, check. Trevor ends up having the check mark here. It's like he is debating whether or not he actually has the best hand. Can he fire out a bet for some value? shoves all in. Practically a pot-sized bet. Looks like Jeremy's counting out some chips. Looks like he does not believe Trevor at all. Jeremy loves making the hero calls.
That it wasn't a snap.
Now, you remember what happened last Sunday?
Trevor ends up doing a little bit of speech play there, saying he's glad it was not a snap call. That's going to get the wheels turning in Jeremy's head. Might actually think he has the best hand. I'm just checking for my own peace of mind. That's all.
You get some brown.
Yeah, it's, yeah. Guess he kind of wants them. Yeah.
Surprised that Jeremy is really going into the tank for this hand. He does have a very playable stack behind him, even if he makes the fold. About 17 big blinds behind. If he makes this call, it's going to pretty much cut that in half. If Jeremy makes the call, he is going to get the bad news. Wow. What a hand for Trevor. That puts him tied for first place in chips at the table. It's practically the only hand that he's played. Actually, that's not true. He played his big blind there, one hand.
Yep.
Sebastian
All in for 36,000. Yep.
puts it all in here with 3-2. Probably didn't look at his hand yet again.
Oh yeah. Can't do math for the hell of it. Yeah.
Jeremy shoves all in here. He gets pocket nines. Nice little hand for Jeremy.
It's probably my favorite thing about this tablet.
Like Dan folds.
Really?
Not sure what Trevor has here. Trevor has pocket fours. What a great fold from Trevor.
Well, that kills a few of my
I
outs.
like to go with the best.
What did you have?
Wait till you four doubles.
36.
Got ourselves the all-in situation. Sebastian is in terrible shape. Not a good flop for Sebastian. 2%. He's going to need runner. He does not get it.
Two of the fours there.
Yeah, they always
Jeremy ends up taking down that hand with pocket nines. Sebastian ends up getting eliminated in sixth place. We are now on the money bubble.
See a few faces tomorrow.
Pay the top four.
So, green bubble. You guys want to pay the bubble?
Last couple times you paid $20 each.
Looking like the players are negotiating. Paying the money bubble. Taking $20 from each of the payouts. And it's looking like the blinds have gone up. 6,000, 12,000 with a 6,000 big blind ante. Remember, it was cut in half.
call.
Looks like
Oh yeah.
the home game parrot in the background is mimicking the blinds going up, attempting to intimidate these players. They're not easily fooled, though. They know the blinds just went up.
Okay.
It's looking Paul and Dan getting involved in the spot. There's the ace now for Dan. Paul has a gut shot. Does not get there. Paul's going to fire out a small bet for value, but he's not going to get called.
Here it is.
That guy's named Benjamin.
Ben, yeah.
Looks like our pre-flop raise here Paul has been the most aggressive. Bernie is right behind him, 20% of his pre-flop raising. Actions to Dan here. Limps in again. King 3 suited. Trevor's on the button. 10-7 suited. Lets it go. Paul's got ace 10 in the small blind. He makes the call. Bernie is going to get to see a free flop because he is in the big blind.
Yeah, gotta check the guy. Just wanna make sure before
It's like Paul is still ahead here with ace high. It's getting checked around. Bernie now has a gut shot. Looks like he's going to attempt to steal this pot. And he does. Bernie takes down that pot. Dan fires out 30K here with King 8 suited. Paul's got a nice little suited connector here, 10-9 suited on the button, and he folds. It's a bit of a small stack. Jeremy shoves all in here with ace queen.
88 more?
Dan's got quite a decision on his hands. Had to suspect that one of these small stacks were going to shove here. If you're going to be betting out like that, you might want to consider the possibility of a shove, which he does, and he makes the call.
Open up. You're good then.
Oh,
Trevor looks a little shocked.
okay.
There's a pair of eights for Dan. Jeremy's going to need some help with an ace or a queen. There's the trip eights. Dan ends up winning that pot, eliminating Jeremy on the money bubble in 5th place. Jeremy ends up taking home $80.
Somebody pausing the clock here while we say
952,000? When was that?
No, $952.
Oh.
Moving into the next hand here.
952,000 would be really sweet. I don't think you'd
Trevor has got ace 7 off suit.
952,000 actually is
Probably
it's
talking
not a
about it a little
great
bit
deal of
more.
money today.
Oh, I don't.
You know, it's a lot. but
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, it's not really.
You need to hit the 10, 20.
Yeah, see ya, Jeremy.
Like, Trevor's going to finally come out firing.
That is 27?
27K. Paul ends up folding the queen 10
It was a
suited.
nice vacation.
Bernie folds ace 5. Dan, the big stack. It's like he is going to get involved with jack 8 off suit, defending his big blind. There's a pair of 7s for Trevor.
Check.
Trevor's going to fire out nice little value / continuation bet. 27K, ends up winning that pot.
Anyway, so. Kind of shows the turn here. So
It shows
they
there,
have
but
their
it's-
effective stack, so.
It shows there, but it don't show on the screen,
What do you mean for,
no?
oh no.
Action is to Bernie now.
So the average.
Oh, cause I don't really update anything, so.
40.
Once we hit
Dan.
the table, I don't touch it other than pausing blind, so.
Fires out 40K in the small blind. Putting some pressure on Trevor. He's got 5-3 offsuit. It's like Trevor's looking like he's going to try to get a little creative here. Like he decides against it though. Decides he's going to find another spot. Did have position on Dan there.
Yeah, because technically you need permission from people, but I know the content creators and stuff that are having a hard time with that right now. But the casinos down there are getting more lenient towards that.
You know, all the YouTube videos, you see people, they're typically their own slot machine, right?
Action gets folded around to Trevor in the small blind. Makes the call.
Okay.
Going to a flop. Looking like our graphics are having a little delay. Not sure what's going on there. Trevor and then Paul first checked and then
Oh, yeah, I go first then?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I saw you check.
No.
I apologize.
Why is it showing you going first though?
looks like we're having a little bit of an error again.
That's weird.
Paul was acting out of turn.
Did you see the same thing I did?
I'm
You can't see the screen.
No.
unless it
The
skips.
button's over there, so not much to see.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a second. Check. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I don't know why it's been. Sorry. Yeah. Actions to Trevor first. That was that's something I didn't even notice on here.
It's like we got it all figured out.
Other option in there.
The button is sitting there, clear as day.
Check that.
Trevor's been getting into some weird spots here with players playing out of turn.
Seriously, Trevor, I thought I'd seen you.
Take a look at Paul again, top of the list for the most aggressive player at the table. Although everybody's sitting pretty close, 22% for Trevor even.
Site and everything, you know, it was nice. Actually, the event that we're putting on, they want a professional photographer
Mhm.
to KK book for live during this one.
Yep. And it's just those things, you know, where people
Trevor.
pay the photographer for the photos, even just to, just for people to put it on their profile on Facebook.
Pocket fours for Trevor here
It is 27.
on the button. Makes it 27 to go. Bernie's sitting here with King 9. He's got a relatively good size stack. He makes the call. He's going to defend. Dealer, what are you doing? Fumbling those cards.
Where's the blaster?
Bernie checks over to Trevor. Looks like Trevor is going to slow down a little bit. There's a third spade that comes down. That now gives Bernie a possible flush draw. He's got a ton of outs, though. 16 outs for Bernie. Looks like Trevor's going to finally fire out a bet. 31K for Bernie to call. He's got a gut shot with a king high flush draw here. It's actually not a bad spot to see another card. Bernie makes the call. Going to a river. Oh! There's the fourth spade, giving Bernie the flush, but Trevor has just hit his set on the river. Another weird spot for Trevor.
That is 38.
Fires out 38K. Bernie makes the call.
I don't have a flush.
I do.
You do?
Bernie ends up taking down that pot.
There was a lot of calling there on the flop with nothing king high. I bet every street you call with king high.
Looking like we're having a little bit of a needle here.
I bet pre-flop.
Not sure it's-
I bet pre-flop, at the flop, at the turn.
Doesn't look too accurate here. It went check on the flop.
No, it was more than 15.
Gave Bernie that free card to hit his flush draw on the turn. But that hand's over. We're going to move into the next one. Action gets folded to Paul on the button. He folds. Bernie, with Queen Jack offsuit. Got a relatively big stack. Going up to the biggest stack at the table, Dan. Bernie fires out 36, and Dan wakes up with pocket tens in the big blind. He makes the call. Oh, there's Dan's 10 on the flop. Bernie's gonna fire out 40K. He's just running to a king here. Like Dan makes the call. There's Bernie's queen.
August? Mid-August, I guess. Actually,
140K bet from Bernie here now.
Oh,
Dan shoves all in.
how much was
That's gonna put Bernie in a really tough spot.
It's all in 359,000 total. Not including here.
Bernie sitting here in a tough spot. He makes the correct laydown.
You seen them, Paul?
Yeah, Jack Queen.
Dan takes down that nice sized pot.
Really get things going.
Action gets folded around to the big stack Dan. Limps in the small blind. Trevor checks behind. Trevor ends up hitting a pair of fives on the flop. Gets checked over to him.
That's 18.
So he fires out an 18K bet. Dan ends up getting rid of his hand.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Can we ask for a dick change?
A dick change?
Dick change?
Oh, a deck change. I think I said dick.
No,
And I'm like, well, I'm not here to judge, but that would be a big pain in the ass to do a deck change. I can, but I don't want to.
Looks like Trevor's gonna come out firing. Put some pressure on that big blind. The big blind folds. Trevor wins the blinds and antes.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a topic of interest for sure, especially with everything that's been going on. But like a simple if I grabbed a new deck, it wouldn't be able to I'd have to register it to the table. So that is 32.
Trevor fires out 32K. On the button. I'm gonna start bullying these players. It's like Bernie's thinking about a defend, which he does. He makes the call. Neither player hits that flop. Trevor's ahead here with 10 high. Bernie's crushed, though. He's only run into 3 8s left in the deck. Trevor ends up firing out 50K. It's like Trevor has an 87% win rate when going to showdown. Paul to 83%. These 4 players have a pretty high win rate.
I know it's a half-hour delay or something, but they have access to the whole cards as we put them on top.
Yeah, they have the real-time
Oh,
access.
yeah, and that's the interesting. They got millions of them.
Yeah, every time I bring up the program for this, it always gives me a thing of like having a secure network and blah blah blah. And don't make sure there's no malware on your computer and like all this other stuff. So.
Like we possible.
Oh yeah, I know. Eh? Like.
It's like they're chatting about the
Green, should've.
Mike Postel cheating scandal.
Yeah, Tom DeLong always said that there's some, like, you have to be really careful at like high stakes because.
Dan ends up hitting a pair of 7s here.
Bet 30.
So nobody's gonna go through the hassle to do it here, you know.
Yeah.
there's no-
Like, and if I changed the deck, if I went and grabbed the new deck, and if I just didn't register to the table and I started giving everyone the card, it would read different cards.
Oh,
Or it
It's
wouldn't
like Paul
even-
decides
like,
now is the time. Blinds are 8,000, 16,000,
73.
8,000 big blind ante.
So, yeah, it's just,
He's in pretty rough shape. Trevor wakes up with pocket jacks.
Jacks? I get 1 over.
Great spot for Trevor
Or
here.
running 8s.
Relatively big pot too, 162K.
That's not good for me.
Trevor in great position here.
Queen?
Oh, and there's the queen on the river. Paul ends up winning that pot now.
73. 4.
Wow.
Paul is now 10 big blinds. Trevor is now down to 12 big blinds.
Okay.
This is now anybody's tournament.
Actually, it's 30.
So all over Moncton.
Yeah.
Dan limps in.
City College.
Ace 8 offsuit on the button. Trevor calls with King 3 suited. Paul's got a nice little suited connector with 6-5.
A lot of the fun.
Well, for his hand.
Ooh, Paul ends up hitting an open-ended on the flop.
Trevor.
Oh. Yeah.
Everybody's acting out of turn for Trevor. Players have got to start paying attention.
32.
May end up implementing a small blind penalty into the pot if the players keep acting out of
Oh, I didn't
turn.
even see, so it didn't
Well,
affect.
yeah.
I just folded.
Trevor calls the bet. Here's Trevor's second club. He now has a flush draw. Paul ends up hitting a pair of 6s.
All in. 150,000 all in.
That's going to put Paul in a weird spot.
What's it play me?
It's actually a great all-in, I think, from Trevor. Does have quite a few outs. Tough spot for Paul. He is open-ended, but Very weird spot. Paul's really giving it some thought.
I have a lot of outs, but I'm gonna fold.
Paul folds the best hand. Trevor ends up taking down that pot. That is a good sized pot for Trevor.
I would put a better
Looks like that puts Paul right back to where he was before that hand against Trevor's jacks. Paul is down to 6 big blinds, 106K.
I like the flop. My 5-6.
Trevor ended up moving back up to second place in chips.
Yeah, but you originally checked it,
I did.
then you called the raise.
Yeah.
You originally checked it against out of turn, then you called the raise.
Yeah. I'd have been okay seeing the turn for free, but I was also not good enough to pay to see it. It would have been weird if I'd have jammed over the top of it.
It would have been very weird, especially when you checked it, especially when you checked out of turn. Especially when you checked out of turn, then you called the raise.
Really starting to wonder if people are starting to play mind games.
But a Jedi trick. You know?
Trevor throwing out some needles out there. Paul ends up getting ace-queen suited.
Says 98 plus a small blind.
Shoves all in.
Makes sense. Should be more.
That doesn't.
Or yeah, no, it's folded. 106.
70, 80, 90.
Curious if Dan's going to make the call here. He's absolutely crushed, though.
106.
That is the problem with playing hands like Queen 10 and King 10, Queen Jack. All those type of hands are easily crushed.
Are we flipping?
He makes the call, though.
Oh.
Got ourselves an all-in situation. Paul's tournament life is at risk. Dealer fumbling the cards yet again. Dan does not get the 10 that he needs. Both players end up hitting a queen, but Paul's ace kicker plays.
You owe them that.
Yeah, yeah. 110?
No,
is that-
106.
106.
I think we're having a graphical error.
Okay. Turn. Right. Oh, okay. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
It's a pretty good four-handed game. Very entertaining. We've had some all-ins and some pretty interesting hands. Looks like it gets folded around to the blinds. Bernie has ace-4 offsuit in the small blind. Blinds are getting large. Bernie fires out 45K. Dan quickly folds.
236. 236. I want to look and make sure I'm not acting out of turn.
And then folded around to the blinds. The two big stacks at the table. Trevor's got a nice little fun hand here with Queen Jack suited. He has position over Dan.
41.
It's going to put some pressure on Dan. Dan quickly calls. There's Dan's king, but there is an ace down on the board.
Check.
40.
Go.
Dan does not look like a believer. Quickly calls Trevor's bet again. Third heart comes down. Neither player has a heart.
Check.
Check.
Trevor is curious to know if he's going to be able to get Dan off this hand.
Kings.
It looked like Dan was going to make the call regardless of what he did. Debating on how quickly he made those calls on those streets. Kind of puts Trevor now as the lowest stack at the table. 10 big blinds. But Paul ends up winning those blinds.
Dirty. Oh, 32.
Dan firing out a min raise. Tried to make it less. Paul with king queen offsuit. He makes the call.
Call.
Bernie calls as well. We haven't seen very many three-handed pots here. There's Paul's queen. 3 hearts down on the board, though. It's going to make him a little bit nervous. Bernie has the only heart with the 2. I think he's going to play it a little bit cautiously. Dan decides not to fire out a continuation bet.
That is 40.
Giving that option now to Paul, firing out on the turn, firing out 40K. He's going to take down that pot.
All in. That's 158 all in.
Trevor shoving all in here with queen 5 suited. Going to put some pressure. Looks like he's going to win the blinds.
Yeah, she's full size, yeah.
Paul gets pocket 7s
Maybe a little bigger than usual, because
under the gun.
Shows anything
Or the cutoff, whatever you guys want to call it. We're 4-handed.
That is 45.
Fires out a 45K bet. Bernie ends up getting a king jack suited on the button. Is he going to put that pressure right back on Paul? Could see an all in here. Nope, Bernie makes the call. Trevor has ace-10 offsuit.
That is 166 plus his big blind.
Shoves all in.
16, 16, so, 76,
Remember, Paul was down to 1 big blind at some point at this tournament. And he managed to get to the money finish. And he shoves his remaining stack in. Bernie folds. We got ourselves a race.
Well,
Yeah, yeah. Now that I see it.
Totally.
Trevor is looking for an ace or a 10. He's going to need some help on this flop. He does not get there. Although a spade on the turn will give Trevor the nut flush draw. Does not get it. And there's a 7 on the river. Paul ends up eliminating Trevor in 4th place. Trevor ends up taking home $200. We are now 3-handed. Action gets folded around to Paul in the blinds. Bernie gets a walk. Blinds are now 10,000, 20,000 with a 10K big blind ante. See, Bernie is the shortest stack at the table with 140K.
When they first introduced the
I'm on.
Says 100 and...
Bernie shoves his remaining stack into the pot. King 8 suited. Dan quickly lets it go.
Yep.
It's like we're moving into the next hand here. Bernie on the button has 6-2 suited. Getting folded around to Dan in the small blind. He lives in.
Okay, sorry, you're a big blind with ENT.
20 and 10.
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay. Should have been on top of it.
And that was just a call.
Mm-hmm.
We're good.
Both players have the same hand. Paul's got the hearts though.
I'm trying to like improve my dealing skills, so
Both players
it's not working.
hit nothing on that flop.
Check. Check.
See which one of these players is going to try to take a stab at it. Well, there's the 10. One of them might try to bet at this pot. Big stack. Fires out 30K. Paul makes the call.
I have a 10.
I have a 10 too.
Both players have the same hand. Looks like we got ourselves a split pot.
Oh, well, we tried that one out.
You lied. You had 10. You said you had 10 too.
What a waste of time.
Yeah. You were on the. Were you on the button? Or you just moved that.
No, I just moved it.
Yeah. Right. Small blind. So you were the closest.
So anyway, I go to the manager, he tells me that. I said, well, it's not settled.
Yeah. So action is.
It's like action is getting folded to Bernie here, who wins the blinds.
Right.
No, because they were pissed that I pushed the whole, and then she got heat from the GM. Oh, because I threatened to go to Moncton and all this stuff and blah, blah, blah.
Action gets folded.
And then.
Over to
it
Dan.
got worse when they opened the poker room in Moncton. Guess who's one of the poker managers? The guy from PEI.
No, really.
Yeah. I think actually might have been let go because of it. Still on the piece of paper on the wall.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean.
It's a lot of folding here.
When it comes to casino stuff like that, I was even in Moncton here. I was the biggest pain in the ass to them. That is 50.
Dan is gonna
But even them talking.
be a little bit aggressive here. Makes it 50K to go. He's gonna try to take those blinds, which he does. Makes the correct play.
As soon as Jason seen me and we were talking, I explained the situation, and Jason's like, "Yeah, pay the guys money." So the guy won like 8 grand. Said, "Can I buy you a beer?" And I'm like, "No, don't worry about it. It's just
I'm on.
Call.
Bernie shoves all in.
Let's go.
Dan quickly calls. Dan has pocket jacks.
Oh, guns.
Bernie's tournament life is at risk. He's gonna need a king. And a king only. He does not get it.
Good. Again, man.
Bernie ends up getting eliminated in 3rd place. Takes home $340.
thank you.
We are now heads up. Both players are pretty much even.
160, so you've got 140.
Could have one hell of a heads up match here.
See, if this was the World Series of Poker, we'd be playing for a $4 million difference, right?
Yeah.
Still shocking to me to remember that Paul was down to 1 big blind and now he is heads up for a chance to win this tournament. A chip in a chair, ladies and gentlemen.
The lotteries or whoever. We had to play a tournament, 50 down to 1, for one person to be able to play. And it was right in the rules. Michael.
I raise 50 more.
Dan ends up getting pocket 7s here. Putting some pressure on Paul.
And if that-
Making it 50K more. Paul calls. 9-6 offsuit.
And told us to go. Yeah. But the cruise was cool.
No help to either player. Dan has the better club with the 7. Paul is only running to 2 outs.
Call.
The got ourselves a pot brewing. Going check, check on the turn.
Check.
100.
Paul is going to take a big stab at this pot, firing out 100K. That's going to put Dan in a tough spot, and Dan lets it go. Paul wins a pretty decent sized pot. That's going to give him the chip lead.
Call.
Dan limps in here with 9-3 suited.
Okay.
Paul has Jack 7 suited of clubs. Dan is not going to want to see any clubs here. But he hits a pair of 3s, but Paul's Jack is top pair.
That's 20.
Dan fires out 20K.
Raise to 50.
Paul 3-bets to 50. Dan quickly calls. Dan needs a 9 or a 3. Oh, and there's the 3 on the turn, giving Dan trips. And Paul keeps firing.
100,000.
Dan must be loving this. A 100K bet.
Oh.
It's like Dan slow plays it a little bit, makes the call. He does have position on Paul here. The king will give Dan the check mark.
All in.
100,000 again.
Paul fires out a 100K bet, and Dan quickly shoves all in.
It says 315,000 all in.
So 251.
It's like Paul was really
I call.
thinking about the decision. Paul calls.
I had to throw.
Dan must be loving that. That is going to put an overwhelming chip lead
Unfortunate
on this heads up.
for me.
Let's take a look at the stacks here. Dan now 980K. Paul now has 6 big blinds with 135K.
Yeah, you hit the king.
That is certainly going to turn the tides of this tournament. Dan is in great shape to try to take this down. Let's see if Paul can make another comeback. Queen 5 suited on the button. He limps in. Dan needs an 8 or a 7. Paul
All in.
has hit top pair and he shoves.
It's all yours.
Dan is really waiting for a good time to put the nail in the coffin here for Paul in his tournament life.
Call.
Raise.
Looks like this might be it.
7 control.
Dan makes it 70K to go, and Paul quickly calls. Paul is crushed here.
Actions to Dan.
All in.
3 diamonds come down. Dan puts max pressure.
No diamonds.
Paul lets it go.
It was a birdie.
There you go.
Oh,
Yeah.
Your big
Big
blind.
blinds.
Action is to Dan. Jack 6 offsuit. Lets it go.
Get it all.
On that one if they're working, so have an angle, just call.
Paul makes the call here. Pocket aces for Dan.
no.
That's a 60.
Awesome.
Dan shows the aces.
And we're playing, it's for points, right? Money and
Yeah.
money for points. So now she's moved it to 640, and they're still,
It's like another walk.
oh,
I call.
5 big blinds. Paul shoves with queen 9 offsuit. Dan calls with king 9 suited.
Oh.
Paul is in bad shape here.
we're both, no.
Dan has a chance to win the tournament.
I don't know if I want a queen or not.
There's 2 clubs down on the board. That eliminates one of Paul's queens. He only has 2 outs. There's the club. Dan ends up taking down this tournament. Wins with a king high flush. Paul gets eliminated in second place. Takes home $510. Dan takes home $730 to win the tournament. And that is it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. And I am your host and commentator, Dave Frazier, signing out. Good night.